Welcome to the Seriously Social podcast with your host, Simone Douglas. Our guest this episode is psychotherapist Dale Hicks. He and Simone chat about self-awareness, being present, and of rejecting the one-size-fits-all approach to wellness.
So today I have Dale Hicks joining me on our Seriously Social podcast from Dale B. Hicks Psychotherapy.
You got it?
Oh, I've got it. Excellent. So really excited to have you join me on what is now the Tan Chairs.
Tan Chairs.
Tan Chairs. I'm wondering if you can just give me the Cliff Notes version of how you got here today.
How I got here today. Okay, so yes, upbringing was that my family had a very fairy tale upbringing. I always like to call it fairy tale upbringing. I wasn't pushed religiously. I didn't have any sort of bias in any direction. And so that led me to ask a lot of questions about life, meaning of life, from a very young age. Didn't know what I wanted to do when I finished school. Joined the Air Force. From the Air Force, had a lot of questions around, I can see myself doing this for 40 years.
Yeah.
And what's my life come to? What does that mean to me? And thought, I need to figure this out. So I quit, went overseas for a year to try and find myself. And throughout that whole period, I was looking at all spirituality to try and understand more about what was going on. But that came at a cost where it hits a limit where you can't actually, there's no science to back it up. And so what's the science say? So I went overseas, had an amazing time, came back, had the exact same questions as I left. The spirituality didn't answer them, it just gave me a sense of self. So came back, went into IT for an internet company, because I just had IT skills from the Air Force. And then went, got the same problem. What do I do? That led into trying to find, or how do I live in a better way? And the only idea I had at that time was more money.
Okay.
So the more money you have, the more successful you are, the happier you'll be.
That is the myth that they sell us.
It is the myth. It's absolutely insanity. So I tried to follow that track using my IT skills for internet marketing. And I was starting to get some success, but again, something didn't feel right. So from that, I looked into neuro-linguistic programming, therapy, a few other little modalities from short courses that I feel like don't help people. And worked with a clinical psychologist who mentored me at the time for a little while. I had a couple of clients that I had some amazing results with using those skills. Got invited to do a lot of professional talks through that. But because of that and the people that I was sort of circling and hanging around, it was very much a crisis of conscious going, what do I have to offer that these people have studied and worked in the field with so many years of experience and so much training? So I thought I need to formalise what I'm doing. And that led me through my Bachelor of Psychology. And then from that, it was too much science. Where's the humanity? Where's the connection with all that sort of stuff? Where's the actual therapy, the one-on-one? Where's the connection with the person? So it's all textbook stuff. And I went into my Masters of Counselling and Psychotherapy, and that really hit the nail on the head.
Nice.
From that, I got the rude awakening that mental health in Australia is very broken. And because of that, I was madly looking for work, and I wasn't rejected on skill set or experience. It was rejected on the fact that I didn't have Medicare. I was with the wrong association or whatever it might be. So, it was I'll look for a job or I'll build a business in my own private practice, and I'll get the support around that, and I'll see which one takes off first. And I got a bit of part-time work here and there, but nothing solid. And at the same time, I was putting in my practice, and the practice just kept going. So, okay.
Nice. So, I think too, it's always handy if you're building your private practice and you have a background in internet marketing, that helps. Because I think what I find a lot with people in the helping space in general and in allied health is that they're great at helping people, they're great at their skill set. They're not very often good at self-promotion. Like it tends, when you're holding space for other people, you tend not to step into this thing and look at me, I'm wonderful.
That's exactly right. It's a very selfless profession. You try and be selfish. Connotations around that. It makes it very difficult. So.
And I think too, one of the other challenges I think in your space is APRA guidelines. And so, depending on which licensing body or registration body that you're with, what you can and can't say, how you can say it. Compared to say somewhere like America where you can say whatever you like.
The regulations around all of that are very interesting. And going back to the mentor when I was studying NLP, and I said to him, look, I want to study psychology, I want to do what you do. And he said, no, don't. And then he said, why don't we do professional talks? And I'm going, why am I getting invited amongst all these professionals? And he said, because you can say things outside of all these regulations and people will connect with you. So,
I think that, there's definitely this opportunity to be real in the space in terms of that connecting human to human. I agree with you that mental health in Australia is pretty much broken, but I think too there seems to be this whole other layer as a business owner too. So I've been talking to a lot of people lately about what I went through during the shutdown for COVID, and thank God I'm not in Victoria, because for those of the people listening to us in Victoria, I can only imagine like the depth of stress that they're under right now and what that stress does to you, emotional and psychological makeup. But that seems to be the conversation that's lacking. So there's a lot of conversation around, economic constraints and, keeping people in jobs, but there's not a lot I'm not seeing a lot of conversation, whether it's online or digital or even in the news around, the mental health and well-being of business owners who have had to stand down their staff and, they built up all these teams, they flogged themselves, as we all do, to grow our businesses. What do you think, we can be doing in our own communities? Because we tend to have, if you own a business, you tend to have other business owners around you. How do you kind of lead that conversation, do you think, to open up the door so people can let off some steam?
That's a really deep question. I'd say in the context of whether it's business owners or you're just employed, it goes back to that whole stigma around sharing how you're feeling. When we're talking about the Are You OK Day or any sort of mental health day that gets promoted around, and it's in your awareness to ask people at work, how are you going? And you get the generic response, I'm fine. It's like, I know you're fine. Tell me more what's going on. But there's this the stigma of my own mental health, and then there's the stigma of the burden that you're going to put someone under if you then vent onto your own issues. Because again, it's that whole selfish thing. I don't want to be selfish and take up all the time and go through all of that. So I guess to answer the question, how to bridge that gap a little bit more is making it okay to share the stuff that you're going through, but also if you're the person asking, don't be afraid to push a little using your empathy. So compassion, get people to draw it out, because people will take a few goes to go, are you sure? Are you sure you want me to?
I'm not sure I want to give you all of this.
That's
so
right.
I'm carrying all of this.
That's right. Yeah.
I think too, one of the challenges I suppose is, in order for someone to feel safe enough to share with you, you have to be vulnerable with them, which means that you have to be honest about what you're going through yourself. And in business in particular, but I think even when you reach a certain stage in your career where you're perceived to be a successful human being, then there's this expectation that you kind of have this veneer or this mask that you walk around with all day. What are some of the things people can do maybe to practice in the everyday, just dropping that mask down a little bit and letting their authentic selves kind of come through and get seen by the world?
How much time have we got?
Not that
So the question is, what can they do to drop that?
What are some of the little steps? So I always like to think, when I first started practicing kind of this mindfulness of actually being present and honest about who I am and what's going on, I liken it to, you have to build up an empirical evidence base that the sky isn't going to fall in every time you show someone who you are. So what are some of the less scary things that we can maybe do or try with people that are closer to us that will help us develop some confidence to be vulnerable with the world?
Well, I think the first thing is making it okay to ask if you can actually share some of yourself. So for that, taking that a step back, you've got to have the confidence to ask the question to then generate the evidence to build confidence. So Yeah, but one of the small things would be, hey, look, I've got some stuff going on at the moment. Can I go through some stuff? Can I drop this mask and have a discussion with you? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Most reasonable people would go, sure.
Yeah.
Or I don't have the time, but I'll make the time, in half an hour or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that brings up a really good point too, in that if you don't have that time right then and there about, when someone, offers something of themselves, be honest and go, actually, I'm drowning myself right now, but I appreciate the fact that you and I want to have a conversation. Let's do that. Can we do that in an hour? Or can I get these emails off and sorted, and then we'll have that conversation? We don't do enough of that too. We go, I'm really busy. The hand goes up, off you go.
That's right. That extends across a bunch of different areas of life as well. Yeah. And underneath it all, it's really just that acknowledgement of the other person. So if you're going out there and being vulnerable, and that person, I guess, twists a knife, well then you're not going to be vulnerable again. But if you're vulnerable and that person acknowledges the vulnerability, well then, and they do it in the right way by saying, sure, let's talk, or I'm going to make the time after I've gone through this stuff, can you give me a few minutes because I know this is important to you. Well, most people would go, you can take a week off and come back to me, but because I know that you've understood that I'm going through something. So extend that into a relationship, and then things like domestic violence and a bunch of other situations that, as a counsellor, you get people coming in from. A lot of it comes down to that acknowledgement. I'm not getting involved. I'm not communicating that acknowledgement effectively. So it's a huge thing.
Well, that thing about being seen and heard too, and I think if you bring that back again, from a personal context, we live in a world right now where we're increasingly invisible. Really, as much as we're digital and everything's there, we're increasingly invisible as human beings and not acknowledged because we're not fully present with each other. To the point that you almost have a fit if you leave your phone at home, can't leave the house for 3 hours and not be contactable. So I think if you bring that back, that fully being present, the minute that you say to someone, I would actually like to give you my full attention, so let me get this stuff out of the weapon so that I can come back to you. I mean, that's a really powerful thing to do in a business relationship, in your personal relationships. But it takes practice again,
over time. Yeah. I think a lot of people would say, "Oh, I'm not like that," or "I've never been the one to be like that." And to that, I would disagree. I would say that a lot of the things that we aspire to be, we've always got is underdeveloped in those areas. So everyone has all the tools to be empathetic, compassionate, acknowledging each other, but we don't have the time, we don't put awareness on it, we don't develop it, we don't practice it.
Or you hold on to a story that gives you an excuse not to develop those things. Some people just go, nah, I'm just not interested, I don't do people. It's well, when you were 6, you did people. You ever met a 6-year-old for the first time? They come into a room and they tell you exactly what they think, what's going on for them. My biggest challenge as a parent has been trying to keep that 6-year-old honesty and vulnerability in my now 10-year-old and 13-year-old without the world breaking it. Because if they can carry that into adulthood, they can be in a really powerful place.
Yeah, that's right.
Relating to the world.
Yeah.
But my challenge is always, I went through a whole stage where I could easily say, I'm not a people person, I just don't do it. It's fine, you either like me or you don't, and move on, which is common.
That's exactly, that's my next point. You get those people who will be unapologetic about who they are, but not temperate with their empathy for the other person. So
I think that that's a really good point, because I talk a lot about being unapologetically you, but that doesn't mean you can be an ass. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So I think that there are people out there who are, to excuse the French, just assholes and don't want to be nice human beings. They generally don't stay in my life for very long. But, they use that unapologetically you as a power dynamic.
Exactly.
But then you've got other people who go, no, well, this is who I am and this is what I'm about. And so for me, that unapologetically me is about, this is who I am in the world, this is what it is that I'm trying to achieve, and this is like what's important to me. You don't get to overlay your reality onto mine and your projections onto me. You're going to try, you can't help but do that. However, it's I'm not going to change who I am in order to make you okay. But I can empathise with the fact that me being who I am is currently making me feel uncomfortable, or is difficult to be around because it's challenging your story about what you can do and what you can be.
Exactly right. It's the awareness around your own responsibility.
Yeah.
And where you sit in interactions.
Yeah.
And exactly like you say, like the stuff that you do in that mindset should be celebrated. It should be celebrated. You're not treading on anyone else's toes. You're going off and doing your own thing.
Yeah.
Anyone who comes along and tries to take that away or call you out or pull you down, it's okay. You know what's going on for you that you feel the need to
make you small.
Yeah,
what's that about?
Small. Yeah, and vice versa. Like you're two people on completely different paths.
Yeah.
It should be a celebration of each other. That what do you need? If I can help others, and if I can,
yeah,
it's not a reflection that no one loves you.
No, exactly. And I think too, it's I find it fascinating because there is a place for every single human being in the society that we have if enough people decide to be decent human beings. I think the challenge that we've got right now is that there's still, people, and I use the business world because that's where I live, but it translates into life.
Right. Yeah.
But there's still two schools of people. There are the people who feel like they need to jump on everybody else's heads in order to go, look at me, I'm amazing, but you're terrible, and you're terrible, and you're terrible, and you're subpar, and you could do so much better. Right. Which is that, I call it a culture of complaint and judgment. So one of the hardest things I ever did was like when I was about 23, is I had to go 30 days without passing judgment on anyone or anything. It's a very interesting exercise to put yourself through because the first 2 weeks you're like, oh my God, I am the most judgmental cow on the planet, because you really are.
Yeah, that's
you
right.
all are.
Yeah.
But it's, towards the end of it, what I found was I actually had got to a point where I was much more accepting of people for just being people, and stuff that I would have previously noticed, I ceased noticing, like what people were wearing, or their hair, or their body composition, or any of those things. Just ceased to be a factor in who I saw or how I saw them. So in the scheme of things with your own business, what have been the biggest challenges for you, dealing with, because I'm guessing that a lot of your clients are under much more stress. So
it's interesting. I had a friend ask me, so what clients are you seeing the most of?
Yeah.
And strangely enough, or not strangely, the first one was men with anger issues.
Yeah.
That's almost not a surprise.
Yeah.
But also relationships, none of it related to COVID at all. But I guess the main thing that I'm seeing and the struggles that I'm seeing for people is, I guess it's that underdevelopment, that lack of knowledge or self-awareness around where they've come from.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to highlight that for some people. Or some people, I guess, find it very difficult to go to certain places because I guess psychotherapy compared to counselling is much more longitudinal because of the great span of time. So you're working in a bunch of different areas and trying to tease out the knots of complexity where people are having these issues. I guess from my perspective, I struggle to see, I can see very clearly the difficulties that everyone's facing.
Yeah.
I guess it's a light comment.
I like to call it the Band-Aid effect when it comes to psychotherapy, in terms of you need to keep coming when it's most painful. So when you slowly rip off the Band-Aid, it really hurts.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, I used to find in my own practices that people stopped at the most painful point. And so I used to have a verbal contract with them at the beginning that would say, at some stage on this journey, you're going to get to a point where it's just not fun. And so what I need you to do is to, choose some kind of a word so that when you go to cancel an appointment and it's because it's just not fun and you're feeling really uncomfortable, you go, it's a blue pickling day, or it's a, whatever else it might be day, which is code for me to follow back up with you and try and get you back to your appointments to keep moving. Because we don't want you to live there.
That's right. It's, I guess the other end of that spectrum is, as a counsellor, you see very quickly what someone's issue is, but it's not for me to point it out. And the mentality that a lot of people come in, especially that come in from the medical model, from psychiatry or psychology, where they sort of sit down like it's a GP and they go, what's my problem? Oh, it's this, do this test, or you have X, Y, Z. Okay, cool, go do this. And a number of clients come through and I'll ask them, have you had counselling before? Yes, through these practitioners. Did it work? No.
That's right.
There's been quite a few that they get sort of very generic one-size-fits-all approaches, square peg, round hole sort of stuff. Go out and get fresh air, exercise, diet. It's like, of course, everyone should be doing that.
Yes, that's part of it.
Does that work? No, one answer I don't think there's any meaning to it.
Yeah.
That's meaningful to it. I don't know.
Yeah.
You didn't go through this in the last 6 sessions?
No.
Oh, okay.
So we're starting from the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of what it feels like. It's sometimes it turns into psychoeducation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And a lot of it comes down to normalising. People, they feel judged when they come in, and then they'll go, "Oh my God, you must think I'm crazy." No, your reactions are normal based on the circumstances you've been in. Don't feel
crazy at all.
Don't feel bad about that.
But I think that's actually a really good point to finish on, which is, in the scheme of things, we don't teach people, and growing up generally, to have an internalized locus of control. And so what happens is they look externally for this meaning, for the check boxes to tell them that they're a good human, a successful human, all these things. But people who are comfortable in life have an internal barometer for those things. They don't have an external barometer. And so, often working with the right therapist that can hold space and explore those things and have conversations starts cultivating and building that internalized focus.
That's right. Yeah. A lot of it's pulling down those cultural and societal barriers, I guess. They have to fit into certain things and want to fit into their tribe and all that. It's like, is that making you happy?
No. And if it's not, you're allowed to change the rules.
That's right. You can be whatever you want. It's finding that sense of self. So,
Well, Dale, thank you very much for joining me today on the Seriously Social podcast. You will be able to find Dale on all of his social and digital links that you will find in the description above. And I will talk to you soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Now you can push the slidey stoppy thing to It's very hard to stop conversations that are good. Chris is giving me the 20-minute thing and I'm going to
Thank you for listening to the Seriously Social podcast. See our website for more details at www.socialmediaaok.com.au/podcast. Check the show notes for credits, music used in the program, and more details about our guests.